Welcome to the October Lunch and Learn. We're so glad and happy that you've joined us. Today we're excited because the October Lunch and Learn is going to feature Region 10, League of Economic Assistance and Planning. Region 10 leverages resources to help build strong communities. And in this session, we will learn how they advance connectivity for Delta, Montrose, Hinsdale, Gunnison, Ouray, and San Miguel. They do that through senior services, small businesses, services, and regional development support. Region 10 Broadband Project encompasses over 600 miles of fiber and 16 carrier neutral locations. Our presenter today is Corey Bryndal, Region 10's Regional Broadband Director. He brings experience with internet routing, long-haul optical, and network management systems. He is passionate about working with rural and remote communities throughout Colorado to establish partnerships that result in improved broadband to underserved parts of the state. And we here at the Colorado Broadband Office, my name is Ed Mills. I'll be the host for today, and I'll kind of manage this session as Corey gets started. We're happy to have him, and I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Corey.
Right on. Well, thanks, Ed. Sure appreciate the invitation and the opportunity to speak and kind of share some of the happenings on the western side of the state. So I am Corey Bryndal. I'm the Regional Broadband Director with Region 10. I live in Crested Butte, Colorado, and Region 10 is based in Montrose in the western slope of Colorado. So we have quite a history within Region 10. Region 10 itself is a 501c3 nonprofit. It was incorporated in 1972. So just like me, that makes it 35 years old. If you do the math, it's actually 49 years old. So it's been around a while, lots of experience, lots of deep roots within the communities. Region 10 serves 18 separate communities within 6 counties. And the counties are Delta, Montrose, Hinsdale, Gunnison, Ouray, and San Miguel counties, primarily all on the western slope. They provide senior services, small business services and support, and regional development efforts. The part that we're here to talk today about is the Broadband Project. So overall, Western Colorado is aspiring to improve its condition, and it's looking to provide abundant, redundant, and affordable broadband. These are naturally not there. We have a very low population density, and there's certain factors that contribute to a condition where we need to make changes. So the challenges that we see include a very high cost of service. It's very difficult to find providers that are able to provide the higher speeds. When you do, they're in fairly limited areas of our territory. Middle mile infrastructure, there's been decades upon decades of efforts to try and increase and improve middle mile infrastructure, and this has certainly occurred in an incremental fashion over a long period of time. And our mission really is to help improve that middle mile infrastructure, make it more available, build more of it, get access to what is currently there. Very often when you go into the smaller communities on the western side of the state, it's really important that we work together, build partnerships, and aggregate demand. Aggregating demand allows us to get more buying power and not to spend the same dollar in parallel over and over and over, but actually get more bang for our buck and improve the services that are available to the end users in the communities. Last mile investment is difficult. Typically, the valley floors within our communities have good service and infrastructure. Beyond the valley floors, you see a lot of challenge. The further you get out from the towns, the village centers, the mileage increases, the population density decreases, and it becomes increasingly difficult for providers to make the investments to increase the services to those community members. Additionally, increasing competition. Very often there's a duopoly situation where you have a telephone company and a cable company and maybe a couple of players around the periphery, but primarily 2 companies providing competition. One of those companies will typically be more in the condensed areas. The other company will be a little bit further out, but neither of them together will reach the entire population of any of our communities. The territories are just simply too large. So to take a quick look here, where's Waldo? So where is Region 10? And I bring this visual up purposefully. So if you look at the electrification that's occurred in the country, and you look at the Mississippi and east, you see quite a few lights on from a satellite picture here in the evening. And if you go west along the coast, you see quite a few lights. If you kind of drill down into Colorado, you see there's a lot of activity up and around the Front Range, the cities along the Front Range. You can see Grand Junction out to the west, and the I70 corridor has some lights there. And then down towards Durango and Farmington, you see activity. Within that kind of western side of the state, our population is really low. That means that the infrastructure we have is fewer and further between. We have a very significant challenge in building infrastructure, creating redundancy, creating competition. So Region 10's mission is to basically help improve that condition. So let me take a moment and introduce Michelle Haynes, and Michelle is with Region 10 as well. Michelle, do you want to go over resources here?
Sure, thanks, Corey. So Region 10, as Corey mentioned, we work in a lot of different areas in our communities, and to do the work that we do, we work a lot with partnerships, and broadband was no different. When we started to think about how to do broadband, one of our first efforts is to think about who else should be at the table and who should our partners be. One of our network is built heavily on the use of existing resources whenever possible. So it made a lot of sense to bring some of our electric co-ops, our rural electric associations to the table. Delta Montrose Electric Association was a huge partner for us in the beginning of our project. We actually worked with them, and they donated use of existing fiber that they had on their lines for operation purposes to our network. And with that, we developed a lot of other partnerships as well. Our network is a middle mile network. It was heavily funded by the Department of Local Affairs, who's contributed about half of the funding to date for the network, along with the Economic Development Administration. And our local counties and municipalities have obviously contributed heavily to the project as well. So almost all of our municipalities are partners, as well as our counties in this project. And with that, then we were able to leverage other partnerships. Corey, do you want to go to the next slide? As we continue to build our partnerships and expand that into foundation support, such as the El Pomar Foundation, the Telluride Foundation, and we continue to build those partnerships as we grow. So with that, I'll turn it back to you, Corey, and I'll be available to take any questions on funding and partnerships at the end.
For sure. Thanks, Michelle. Appreciate it. So we do have other entities that are somewhat similar or adjacent to Region 10. We have Project THOR, AGNC, Southwest Colorado Council of Governments, and these are all organizations that operate networks today. And one of our missions as a middle mile provider is to be able to connect to those networks and really get the accelerated benefit of having a larger patch, more diversity, and more connection with our peer networks. We do have good, excellent relations with the Front Range Gigapop and working with the folks at UCAR to extend educational services throughout the Western Slope. And we have a number of private internet service providers that actively work with us and pursue development in the communities that we operate in. So this is a little bit of an overview of the network as it exists today, and I'll speak a little bit to some of the coming projects as well. So we currently have IRU'd fiber that comes down from Grand Junction into Delta through Olathe and also directly down into Montrose. We have fiber that goes all the way down into Nucla, down into Norwood, and into Telluride. So as we bring middle mile fiber into each of these communities, we're not necessarily serving end customers. We're bringing fiber to the community where we then partner with various entities within the communities to extend that service out to the end users. So it's in almost no case do we actually contact an end user. we're supporting folks that are operating networks locally in the communities. So we'll be building all the way out into Cedar Edge, up into Peonia and into Crawford. Those connections are there. We're also have a number of projects involving Fruta, Colbran, Parachute, a number of the communities in and around Grand Junction. One of the interesting legs of the network is actually from Montrose into Gunnison. That's an area that has a long history of outages. And those outages typically take down the entire Gunnison Valley, which involves a hospital, university, city and county assets, police, and the entire resort community of Crested Butte. So if an outage occurs along that path, or even if an outage occurs closer to the Front Range, that entire portion of the state goes dark. Recently, the fiber over Cottonwood Pass has been completed, and CenturyLink was the partner on Lumen now, the partner on that path. And we're just on the cusp of activating redundancy into Gunnison, Colorado. So that's very helpful. Also not shown on the map is a project going down into Lake City, where Lake City is going to see fiber to the home and fiber to the business development within the community there, as well as a fiber path going down that way. So a number of other projects. One significant project that was actually a build as opposed to an IRU was a partnership involving Ouray and Ridgway. And this was called the Ouray County Public Health Network, OCPH. And I think it was just about 43 miles of new fiber was built between Montrose and Ouray, and it serves a host of communities along the way. There are private providers that have plans to build out and serve thousands of rural and remote homes in the area, as well as improve the services to the businesses and community anchor institutions throughout those communities. Go forward one. So a couple of network considerations. As you look into building middle mile fiber into communities throughout the state, the questions come up: do you do a build? Do you IRU fiber on existing assets, or do you investigate leases? And the answer is kind of a mix of all of the above. We would prefer to IRU fiber on existing assets. That's not always available, and sometimes the costs are prohibitive, and sometimes they're simply exhausted cabling. In those cases, we'll have to go out and find funding sources and partnerships to build. In some cases, we have the opportunity to lease fiber on a non-capital basis, and we can do that as well. Our network consists of a mix of each of those types of acquisitions. Ownership and management is kind of a mix as well. We're typically government oriented, so we work first with the counties and the cities and the key durable stakeholders in each of the communities. We work with nonprofits as well. Telluride Foundation and Telluride has been incredibly helpful and very just tack sharp on the spot as far as working through infrastructure issues, legal issues, funding issues. They're a great example. We have a number of private ISPs that work with us as well. So often when we bring in a new middle mile connection into a community, we've got several ISPs right on our coattails saying, hey, we're beginning to evaluate the community. We're beginning to do route planning. We're beginning to build a business case. We're looking for private investment to expand in the community. We're looking for public investment to expand in the community. So we definitely have a lot of active ISPs that work with us, and always looking for more. The doors, of course, open. Consortiums and COGs, councils of governments are ubiquitous throughout Colorado, especially in the western portion of the state. So areas such as the Northwest COG, the Southwest COG in Durango area, AGNC, there's a list, probably 8 or 10 of them that we actively work with, and we look for ways to identify gaps in service, bring the middle mile infrastructure to those locations. And I'll talk in a minute about how we build a carrier neutral location and move on the benefits of bringing the middle mile into there. Funding comes from a mix as well. Local match funding is incredibly important, especially with DOLA. If we're using DOLA funding, Department of Local Affairs within Colorado, there's a local match component to that and some specific rules around sourcing those dollars. Very often the ISPs will actually collaborate with us and help fund a build or an acquisition as well. State and federal partners are both incredibly helpful. state again through DOLA, Colorado Broadband Office itself, and several federal agencies, including the EDA and the FCC. So this is a kind of, to move on, this is an example of a route that is just adjacent to Region 10's territory. This is a route that we are building, or we are putting together with several partnerships. So this is a section of I-70, the I-70 corridor going from Glenwood Springs through Rifle and coming all the way into Palisade and Grand Junction. It'll actually extend beyond what you see here all the way out to Fruita on the western side of Grand Junction. So this project involves CDOT. It involves local governments in Glenwood Springs and in Rifle as well. It involves the county. It involves a private partner in Grand Junction, where we're acquiring fiber from them to get from Horizon Pass down into a carrier neutral location that's being built in the city of Grand Junction. So this will likely involve new carrier neutral locations, basically co-location facilities in Glenwood Springs, in Rifle, potentially in Parachute, certainly access into Beck, Palisade, Grand Junction, and Fruita. And this network gives us the ability to bring in private providers to invest in infrastructure in all of those towns along the way, gives us access down into Colburn. It also allows us, very importantly, to connect to Project THOR, which begins in Glenwood Springs. It's another public project, nonprofit, that begins in Glenwood Springs, goes north all the way up to Rangeley and Meeker, across into Steamboat Springs. Project THOR continues along I-70 all the way down into Denver into 910 15th Street downtown. So by connecting to a peer project, we're able to provide transport and data services to that project from the areas that we serve. We're also able to leverage for our benefit the access that they have into Denver and elsewhere. So this gives you a little bit of a snapshot. Denver being here kind of central. The blue area is the Project THOR territory, the infrastructure that they own and control and manage. The orange and blue dots here are generally the Region 10 area, going over into Gunnison into Crested Butte, starting in Grand Junction and continuing all the way down into Ouray, Nuclear Natarita. And then if you look at the Southwest Cog, as you continue south from Ouray and down into Cortez and Durango and over into Pagosa Springs, this is the area that the Southwest Cog operates. So it's really important to us from a Region 10 point of view to peer with our north and eastern neighbors as well as our southern neighbors. Now we've also extended that partnership to go all the way out into the San Luis Valley, to go all the way out into the southeastern portion of the state through CCOM, and we'll begin talks to extend into the northeastern portion of the state as well. So kind of shifting gears a little bit. So the first thing is to get the cabling and the fiber into the communities. The second piece is to allow networks to connect. And this is kind of a key concept. Traditionally, in a co-location facility in a city, in order to connect the middle mile, the long haul fiber to a local provider or a local internet service provider, that provider needs to rent rack space in a telco central office. That's traditionally how this has been done. It requires some form of regulated CLEC status that the ISP has to go through, and that's a legal process. It requires entering into an interconnection agreement, and that can take several iterations. There's a number of ways to accomplish that, but it's a fairly significant administrative task, and it comes with similar benefits. It's basically a mix of regulated and unregulated facilities that then become available to this ISP that would like to provide service in the community. The equipment that ISP might put into the co-location space at the telco central office has to be NEBS compliant. So there's some evaluation of that equipment, and it has to pass fire ratings, physical size, power consumption, a number of different evaluation metrics. And at the end of the day, in order to use the telco's infrastructure and reach the clients that the ISP would like to, there's a service order management system, and orders need to be placed in that service order management system and then executed and billed accordingly. So at the end of the day, you're going through a process that's helpful, but you are occupying a competitor's facility. So there's a lot of hurdles here. And the result is there's a lot of complexity, a lot of time, and a lot of expense required to reach the customers. So as a result of that process, actually, before we move on real quick, this is just a quick view of what a typical Bell Central Office co-location facility would look like. You've got DC power battery backup on the left. You've got very narrow equipment sitting in racks. You've got an incredibly clean and neat and well-organized environment. And you've got dust-free floors and good things going on here. So just to give you a little bit of a visual, typical Bell Company central office. So as a result of that process, the time, the complexity, and the expense, in the NFL cities, carrier hotels started to take root. And these are facilities or buildings that grew up right next to Bell and AT&T central offices. They're typically private facilities, and they're typically in the larger cities. They're easier to access. They're commercial facilities. They have a lower cost way to connect between rooms within the carrier hotel, and a lower cost way to connect into the Bell Company as well. They're typically an unregulated environment. And as a client coming into there, an ISP trying to reach your customers, you basically buy space, you buy power, you buy connectivity, and you're buying physical security to your equipment. A couple of good examples of this in the large cities are 60 Hudson Street in New York City and 1 Wilshire in LA. I'll give you a quick view of those. So this is not Crested Butte, Colorado. This is New York City looking at 60 Hudson. The central building there is entirely filled with small companies providing internet services throughout the greater New York area. So this is kind of what it looks like on the inside. When you're connecting between different co-location suites within that building, this is called ABAM cabling. This is kind of the old school stuff when you had T1s, but it's a very unregulated environment as contrasted with what you saw in the Bell Company photo earlier. This is 1 Wilshire in Los Angeles. Again, another carrier hotel that grew up very close to the Pac Bell facilities there. This allows the companies to place their equipment and build networks out to reach end users and customers. It also happens to terminate a lot of the subsea cable that comes in from the Asia Pac region. Why is this important? These big city things. One more example, 910 15th Street. We've all heard of that one in Denver. This is an interconnection facility right downtown in the theater district. Sits immediately adjacent to a windowless building next to it, which is the old Mountain Bell building, and provides suite after suite after suite, cage after cage for local internet service providers to extend their services and connect into the Bell Company. Why does this matter? Because we're able to now do this on a micro scale and take the improvements that were requisite in the large metro areas and impose those benefits to use that in small communities. So we create a carrier neutral location. In a rural and a remote community on Western Colorado, this allows the middle mile to meet the last mile. It's quick, it's easy. It provides low cost interconnection between those two networks. It creates a faster time for that ISP to invest in your community. If have an ISP that wants to come into a small town and says, hey, no one's serving here, or they're underserved, and I'd like to go ahead and make an investment, providing middle mile fiber, a place for them to put their equipment, and a way to reach the community is invaluable. It's neutral. In the cases that I'll show you in a moment, we work with municipalities, we work with public entities, we identify spaces and places that do not have a commercial bias in pricing or availability. These are places that are truly carrier neutral. It encourages partnerships. That's the other piece, is it really gets the community involved. When we begin to plan fiber into a community, when we begin to plan a carrier neutral location, it gets a number of different folks throughout the community, private and public, involved, and the entire broadband conversation advances. So contrasting with 60 Hudson, 1 Wilshire, and 910 15th Street is our beautiful facility here at 510 Auto Street in Ridgway, Colorado. If you take a look at this building, while it's a fraction of the size of the large metro buildings, it has redundant air conditioning. It has power coming into the building. It has fiber coming in and out of the building. It has a redundant generator that is gas powered sitting there. And importantly, in a rural community, it also has a tower nearby for wireless ISPs to extend the reach of their networks. So it provides the exact same function that 60 Hudson in New York does, but it does this in Ridgway, Colorado. And it means that there's multiple ISPs occupying that building, competing for service, and providing the benefits to the community. So as the building was being built, this is the inside of that building. It's kind of halfway in between the regulated and unregulated look. It is an unregulated environment. We have dual air conditioning on the back. We have racks for middle mile fiber coming in. The equipment in the photo that's in the second rack there belongs to Region 10 in this case. Lumen or CenturyLink, I believe, is in the building as well. I'll have to check that, but that's the intent. And then on the end there, you'll see last mile ISPs putting their equipment in the rack and building their networks out throughout the community. This is the carrier neutral location in Ouray, Colorado. This has several ISPs occupying the facility today. One of them has built out fiber throughout the community of Ouray. There's multiple middle mile options, and you have a 100-year-old beam. This is in the basement of a public building, and this facility has been improved for these occupants. It also has redundant air conditioning, it has redundant power, it has access control and lighting. So in Telluride, Colorado, we have a room in the back of the school district, similar setup, access control, swipe your badge to get in. Here we have the redundant power. Since it's Telluride, everything's elevated for the snow level. And if you look on the right there, you'll see access to internet service providers' dishes heading up towards the mountain where they can broadcast signals out to remote users. So Region 10 currently has a list of CNLs. We have them in Montrose, Grand Junction, Nucla, Crawford. We have one in Paonia. There's a CNL in Hotchkiss, Olathe. The Gunnison Police Department is hosting a CNL. Western Colorado University has a CNL on site. These are all environments where a private carrier can come in and place their equipment and assist in serving the community. You saw the Ridgway and the Ouray CNLs in the photos before. Norwood has a CNL. The town of Crested Butte just completed their CNL with a tower, redundant power, and access control as well. That's located in the police station. Telluride School District assisted with us. And we're expanding into a number of different ones. I've just put a couple examples here. Mount Crested Butte is planning a CNL in the middle of the resort. CB South, a community just nearby. Rifle and Glenwood Springs have done an RFP to acquire construction services for CNLs or carrier neutral locations in both of those communities. Fruta, Palisade, and Colburn are all actively engaged with us to get middle mile fiber into the towns and build CNLs for the same reasons. And we have ISPs looking at those communities actively and very excited to serve. Lake City and the town of Pipkin are geographic outliers, and we have fiber being built in Lake City. We have a solution that's about to come online for the town of Pitkin, and both communities have CNLs in place. Actually, I'm sorry, Lake City has a CNL in place, Pitkin will have a CNL in place. So this is an example of just a stock template of what a carrier neutral location could look like. We have two middle mile racks on the left, where if there's several middle mile providers, they can put fiber distribution panels, optical transport equipment, routing equipment, whatever they want to bring the long haul services into the town. We've got some overhead fiber and cabling trays. And on the right, as an example, we have three 4-post racks there, which last mile or local providers can put their equipment in and get in and out of the building. Redundant air conditioning up top, a couple walls in this example, and then we have a fiber termination panel on the lower left. The door is a fire rated door, has access control for both key and badge swipes. We have cameras, IP cameras within the facility itself, so we know who's in there, who's doing what. If there's ever a mistake or a problem, we're able to have video capture of that. and they don't take up a large space. These are typically a 10 by 20 room at the greatest. So it's a small investment in really improving the condition, broadband condition within the community. So what's the impact of all this effort to bring middle mile fiber in, to build the CNLs, to work through the partnerships and the funding? Is the results. The results are that you see a lot of dark blue and royal blue on this map. In the communities that we've operated in, specifically the ones that DMEA has served and leveraged the middle mile, as well as the outliers, you're starting to see more and more 100 megabit and greater level of service availability. You're also, what the map doesn't show is you're seeing additional redundancy, you're seeing increased competition, lower prices, better service, and quicker restoral of service. So where do you engage? First thing is to size up what resources you do have available. Are there right of way? Is there conduit in your community? Are there pole attachment opportunities? Does some fiber exist, or are there places where we can place it? You need to identify an integrator, work with someone who can build the CNL, someone who can build the middle mile fiber, us or a similar organization. Aggregate demand, incredibly important. Every dollar you spend in a rural community matters. And if you're doing this in parallel, side by side, you're spending the same dollar over and over. If you can work with your private and public partners and aggregate demand, you're going to free up dollars to build more network assets in the local community. At the end of the day, ownership is key. You own your destiny. Putting all these components together really comes down to the efforts that we do in the rural parts of the state. No one's going to ride over the hill and do it for you. We have to be part of owning our destiny. So the last slide I've got here is when you're on your phone, when you're on your laptop, you're typically not using an application or a piece of software that's right down the street or in the closet anymore. It's all cloud-based. So this infrastructure that we're building, middle mile, local, statewide, and elsewhere, is ultimately allowing you to use software and services that are sitting in remote locations. The software and services primarily are sitting in the NFL cities, the places that have lots of lighting at night, and we're consuming them in the rural parts of the state. There's certainly exceptions and corner cases, but for the most part, we're consuming software that is operating elsewhere, and the network is what allows us to do that. And my name is Corey Bryndal. Here's my contact information, and Michelle Haynes joined us as well, and glad to answer any questions that you all may have.
And Corey, while everybody's getting a chance to formulate these questions, we have two on the chat. I'm going to give them both to you, and you can answer them in whatever order you want. Number one is Virgil still at Region 10? That's the first question. And then Bruce has asked, who maintains the CNL? And anyone else that has questions, if you could just raise your hand, we'll go ahead and open up the talk feature for you. But if you could go ahead and answer those two questions, Corey, I will allow Eric to talk, and we're going to open it up to everyone.
Okay, yeah, absolutely. So Virgil has retired from Region 10. He spent a decade working on getting these networks and facilities in place, and he is happily traveling around the country in a Airstream motorhome, seeing family and friends and enjoying the first phase of retirement. So we're excited for him, and I am the director taking over the position that Virgil previously held. And as far as the CNLs are typically owned by the local public entity, but Region 10 then does a lease, $1 lease for the facility to manage it. So we're not trying to derive any significant revenue from it. We're trying to create the situation to get the benefits that we described and not burden the actual owner of the facility with managing co-location contracts and changes in cabling and all those things. So we actually provide that kind of as a service. We'll lease back the CNL facility, we'll help you do the improvements, we'll help you through the RFP process. And once that CNL is placed, we'll do an agreement to actually manage that facility for you and help attract ISPs into your community.
Anyone else have questions? Eric, did you have a question for Corey or Jill? Go ahead.
Hey, Corey. Well, as you know, I'm predominantly interested in improving and in charged with improving broadband down here in the Pagosa and Archuleta County area.
Oh, here.
But I was curious, you're talking about the Colburn area. Actually, that's where I'm from and went to high school. And my parents still live there. So whenever I go up and have terrible internet up there, it's still very much on my mind. I didn't see a fiber line coming off of that Grand Junction to Glenwood kind of trunk line that you were indicating. But you said that fiber is intending to come up into the Colburn Plateau Valley area. Is that correct?
Yeah, so sorry, that map is a little bit dated. There's a couple of updates that I've got to do to add some legs, that and one or two others. So yeah, Colburn is actually, the route has been planned and we're working on funding, and there will be a new fiber build down into Colburn, and we're kind of going through the details with the community stakeholders there, and that'll come from Debec, land in Colburn, and it will terminate in a new carrier neutral location. And I've been working with the public works folks there to assist them in the meantime in making sure they've got conduit in place as they open water lines. So some of those routes throughout the community can be used once we get the middle mile fiber and the CNL in place.
Yeah, I don't believe they even have CenturyLink fiber that goes into that community. So that'll be huge. Yeah,
it'll be a new build completely, and it'll be just a game changer for them. When we go into these communities that have little either unserved or underserved, and we bring the infrastructure in, it's just like giving them light in the morning. I mean, it really is a game changer. It has a lot of effects that you all know very well. So.
Thank you for the question, Eric. Anyone else have questions for either Corey or Michelle?
It's Michael Murphy here with Hinsdale County and Club 20. How's everyone doing?
Hey, Michael.
Hey.
Great. Hey, Corey, just wanted to welcome you on board and tell you what a pleasure it's been working with Michelle and Virgil on the Hinsdale County Lake City Fiber Project. Guys, these small rural communities couldn't do it without Region 10. And I just wanted to take a second and thank you for all your efforts and your hard work in getting the rest of us into the 21st century. So not a question, just a statement and a comment. We truly appreciate everything Michelle and you guys are doing.
Thank you.
Thank you.
A lot more to come in the future.
Thank you, Michael, for that. Anyone else? Some exciting stuff. And again, that's how we came to understand. We heard about all the exciting things that were going on, and we knew that this was a story that needed to be told far and wide. Again, there's two options for you. You can either put a question in the chat if you don't want to ask it online, and I'll go ahead and ask it, or either Corey will field that, or you can just go ahead and ask your question now. Looks like we've got someone who I guess I didn't lower the hand, so that was Michael. Anyone else?
Hey, glad to answer any questions or provide any context we can, guys.
Well, Corey, I think that's meaning that you probably just did such a fantastic job. You answered all the questions.
Well, thanks, Ed, for the opportunity to share. We're always up for input, and love to hear different ideas, different aspirations, and always glad to chat with communities throughout the state.
Well, we appreciate all the work that you're doing and continue to do. For everyone on this session, as you can see, there's the email for both Corey and Michelle. We will have this recording up in about the next week or so, so that if you've missed anything or you want to point anyone to this. Again, I am Ed Mills. I am with the Colorado Broadband Office, and we want to help you to get the kind of connectivity. We have a lunch and learn that is scheduled every month. Usually the third or fourth week of the month, depending on availability on everybody's schedule. Next week or next month, we will be talking satellites. and how that can bring broadband to your communities. We want to thank you, both Corey and Michelle. Thank you for your time. Thank you for your work. We appreciate you. And anyway, we hope everyone has a great day. Take care.